And he said, as soon as I laid hands on him after the guided meditation, I felt his wife come through. And I do get messages from the deceased. So I got a message from her. I worked on him and he felt her presence right above him. And she was speaking to him not verbally, but non-verbally. And he said it was nothing like he experienced with 2 years of her passing. So when we finished the session, before I could share the messages, he shared his experience and he said, something huge was lifted and I'm connected with her now. And my first message was that she was with him, walking beside him, and he would feel her now. So everything lined up.
Welcome to the House of Jermar podcast, where wellness starts within. The House of Jermar is a lifestyle brand, empowering women to live all in through interior design and personal wellness. We are a destination for women ready to reimagine what is possible in their homes and lives, and then create it. We are honored to have you join us on our mission to empower 1 million women to live all in. I am your host, Jean Collins, and I invite you to become inspired by this week's guest. Welcome to the House of Jermar podcast, where wellness starts within. I'm your host, Jean Collins, and today we are talking Reiki and intuitive. I am so excited. I have Lisa Labozzo on the show. She is a Reiki master. She's also an intuitive healer, and I am so blessed and fortunate that she lives in my town in New Canaan, Connecticut, and I got to experience a session with her last week, and wow. It was life-changing and just so insightful and so special. And she does do it on Zoom, everybody, so you don't have to live where I live. So we are going to talk about Reiki. We're going to talk about her journey, how she got here. She hasn't always been a Reiki master. And she has a special twist to Reiki with her intuitiveness that I think is really unique. So I am really excited. So Lisa, thank you for joining the show.
Thank you for having me, Jeannie. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. So you have such a fascinating background story. And I love to start off by sharing people's background stories, because one of the purposes of this show is to inspire women to recognize that there are things out there that they can do if they follow their passions that they might not think about. So if you wouldn't mind starting off sharing a little bit about your journey, because you were not always a Reiki master.
I wasn't. Actually, I was in the wholesale women's shoe business for a number of years. And I had started out with a very small company and went over to 9 West, which I'm sure you're familiar with, had a very large territory. And I also had worked on the West Coast, headquartered, Northeast Territory for Palos Verdes Footwear, and had just signed on as the vice president position globally with Jolie, and unfortunately didn't arrive there because of the accident. So it was a big turning point in my life. It was everything I worked hard for. And within a minute, in a blink of an eye, it was taken away.
So share with everybody what the accident is.
So it was the first day of my vacation. I hadn't gone anywhere, but I was local in Darien. And I was actually that evening set out on a journey to go see my dad's best friend. He had cancer in the hospital and I wanted to visit him. And so I did just that. But on my journey home, which I don't remember, but I was told I was very emotional and probably should not have been behind the wheel. I was cut off on 95, not short of the exit 10 in Darien that I was getting off of. And I flipped twice. So my loaner car was in the middle of the lane and the seatbelt was wrapped around my neck. So my airway was cut off and I was blue, so I was told. And the gas from the car was pouring out. And I also had a very severe head injury. So unfortunately, I had backed up the emergency vehicles, but by chance, and by a good blessing, the manager of the paramedics felt intuitively to come out, and he did. And in doing so, he cut the belt from my neck, he revived me, he held me up to the roof of the car until the emergency vehicles arrived, and then rode into the hospital, which is not usual protocol, but he felt because I was breathing and not breathing that it would be a better shot to do that. And so thankfully he did.
Wow. And your injuries were severe.
Very severe. Broken neck, which most people don't survive. Very bad head injury, right? So when I got to the hospital, I went directly up to ICU. I was unconscious. I had cracked my spleen. I was in really bad shape, and they had to make some decisions on emergency surgeries, but the doctors weren't certain if I was going to make it through the night. So they called my family in for my last rites that evening.
Wow.
Yeah. So I wasn't scheduled, or they felt that there would be a chance that they would lose me.
Right. And how long did it take you until you became conscious?
Oh, it's interesting. What happened? I was on life support, right? So I did become conscious, but my understanding was I began to, with not being so medicated, I was trying to pull the life support out. So they then induced me into a coma again. So as soon as I opened my eyes, it wasn't long before I shut them once more. So yeah.
Yeah. So talk about how that experience changed your life, because you didn't go back to working in fashion and working in shoes and working for Nine West. So that event and your recovery from that event, talk about that and how that changed your life.
Well, the event was interesting in one sense, Jeannie, because people see the light often. I did not. I saw colors, and I associate those colors with angels, and I feel that now. So there's my confirmation, right? So, and I've been told, by a medium I saw afterwards, there were angels, at the scene, there was angels in the hospital, and I do confirm that. I do feel that now because of my gifts that are there. Yeah. But, I couldn't swallow, I couldn't eat, I couldn't walk, I couldn't do all the things that I did normally of running around the country were taken away. And then, I also had to learn how to walk again, learn how to swallow again. I had no hair. And that was huge. It's like, for a woman, when everything's stripped away from you, I can't explain it. You don't feel feminine anymore. You don't feel whole anymore. You feel like, who am I? Yeah. And that's exactly, who am I? Where am I headed? What's going on here? And during that time, I had lost my short-term memory. Oh. That was a game changer because I couldn't remember. Yeah. So I was scared. I thought, oh my gosh, is this going to come back? Or am I not going to be able to remember moment to moment? Right. So that was a sudden shift. And behind the scenes, there was my brother who had muscular dystrophy. So he was at my parents' residence because they had, equipment and nurses and so forth. And he was a big part of my life and a big part of who I was in his care, along with my father and my sister. Because my mother couldn't walk. And so, they were hoping that they were trying to navigate him not finding out too much, right? So I hadn't talked to him for a month. So there was so much going on all at once, right? But as the journey unfolded, I went to ICU, and this male nurse who was a travel nurse said, I heard about this accident and I really want to help this woman. And he becomes a very important role. Doing things that normal nurses don't know, to advance me. And a connection became between us that I couldn't explain. And then when I went to step down, which is, you graduate from ICU for lack of better, and you go to this, you're like, okay, I'm making some progress here, right? So here comes this intern. And he becomes a part of the journey. And so as I'm getting ready to leave step down and go to a rehab, he says, I can get you into Van Munching. And they were full. And lo and behold, he does. So each step of the way, there's another person, which I find very fascinating. So it was all divinely planned on my journey, right?
Yes.
So even going, obviously this is going quicker than it was in the hospital, but, even going to rehab was difficult. It was like another whole segment in high rates of pain, and I couldn't eat, and there were visitors, but there wasn't throughout the day. And I had to go prompt myself up to, walk a treadmill and get in and out of a fake car and go upstairs. I mean, you have to do these things that you did all your life all over again, like a newborn, like a toddler.
Yes.
And I was in a lot of pain. And like movement was not easy because my body had taken such a trauma to it. Right. But I got there.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what the journey held ahead. Like I kept that vision of going back to the shoe business, but not so. Not so.
Not so. Yeah. How long were you in rehab?
I was in a few weeks. I wasn't in long.
Okay.
Probably
Good.
not long enough.
Oh.
But it was an eye opener. You know, it was the nurses were very coddling and very kind and very loving. But I was ready to go. I was ready to get out of that whole hospital scene because it had been so long, you know?
Yeah.
And I think people really do. I think they start to fly once they start to move forward, once they get in a, familiar environment, right?
Yes.
But that was tough too, right? Because I couldn't go to my home in Darien. I had a home in Darien. I had to go with my parents. I couldn't live alone. I couldn't walk. I was on a walker. Right.
Right.
I couldn't swallow. So I was on like baby food and pureed foods and speech therapists coming and OT and PT. I mean, I remember something was going on. But a very moving moment was when I walked in with a walker and I appeared in front of my brother, who was waiting in the way background, like, where is she? And it was just a very emotional moment of I'm alive.
Right.
I'm here. It's going to be okay. Even though I didn't feel like it was going to be,
Right.
I wore that hat somehow.
Of course, for his purposes too.
Absolutely.
Wow. And then what happened next?
And then I was still employed by my, my employer. I didn't resign.
Right.
So I was doing some work from home. Hard to believe because again, my memory was just coming back. But I felt that if I was active, and I still had an assistant and they were getting ready for a worldwide shoe show, that I would be able to keep my job for a while and keep myself occupied. But lo and behold, I did all that. And then I received an email saying that, my funds were going to be cut by, 3/4 and that shortly I was going to be let go. So, it doesn't seem so monumental right now, but it was. Because I had lost the vice president. I was in the middle of my divorce. I was in the middle of a divorce. Everything I knew what I looked like, I didn't look like. I had a head that was wrapped like a mummy. I had a brace from my chin all the way to my hips.
Wow.
I was on a walker. I was like a robot.
Yeah.
And I was feeling very down. I was trying to keep a high vibration and my family was very supportive and my friends and people from the church and everybody that came from everywhere and even the shoe business, very supportive. But I had to face this journey one-on-one with the Most High. And that was pretty scary. Just
totally.
It's terrifying.
Terrifying. Yeah. When you're in it, it's terrifying. It's hard to get up every day when you feel like that and have all that doubt and all that fear. It's hard to get up and be excited to want to do more work and plow through the pain.
And remember, I was coming from the fashion business, so I was always looking good and I had my makeup and my hair. And I know that sounds so superficial, but think about there.
Yes.
It's like going from, 10 to 0.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's hard when so much of your identity is wrapped around how you look and your job title. I can totally relate, as can so many women. We define ourselves very often by our careers, our success, and the environment that comes with that. And in fashion, it is all about, how you look, right?
Absolutely.
And when you can't look that anymore and can't act that anymore and can't travel and can't walk, it's like, wow, then who am I?
Yeah. And you know what, Jeannie? You feel like you're invisible.
Yeah.
Here you are in a spotlight. Not that you're a superstar, but you're in the public. You're well put together. You know what to do. And all of a sudden you fade.
Yes.
And then there's the unknown. And then all these gifts start. I start to see things and feel things. And what is that?
Let's talk about that. So how did that start?
Interestingly enough, I had my head capped. And so they had to do graft on my head. So I was getting ready for that surgery and I started to feel angels and hear this voice. And I thought, oh boy, like, is this the short-term memory? Is this the concussion? what is this?
Right. Is
And,
the end coming?
right, right. Or who's communicating with me
Right.
and so I didn't know. And I was talking to a couple spiritual friends who were very, religious and said, maybe it's the voice of God. And I thought, the voice of God? Like, have I heard that before? Like, I don't
Right.
think so. Like,
Yeah.
what is that all about? And you're right. I was before surgery. So I was scared. Right. And I was like, is that voice trying to tell me like, this is it?
Yeah.
But actually it wasn't. The voice was trying to say, you're going to go in for a graft. It's all going to be okay. And my angels are going to be there.
Right.
And so I can't explain it. I had this warmth come over me, this vibration that was so incredible. It's hard to put into words. And it followed me, to the hospital with my father. And it was there when they were prepping me. And the nurse would say to me, there's nothing to worry about. You have your angels here. And I thought, oh boy, how does she know? What is going on here?
Yeah, right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And then you almost don't want to tell anybody, right? Like I've spoken to people
Especially
who are
my
intuitives.
family. I thought they think,
They think you're crazy. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. Time to put you in the psych ward and identify this head injury and what has actually happened to you. Right. Yeah.
Exactly true. So I rolled with it a little bit. I thought there was a couple people I could confide in, knew that they were very spiritual and they were very connected. And that was kind of like a hand holding for me in a safe place. Right. And we all need that safe place. But it was foreign to me. I'm like, okay, where's my shoe bag? And it was far away. All that world was very far away and pulled away.
So how did you get into Reiki? Where did that come into play?
Well, interestingly enough, there was a Reiki master who headed up the Bennett Cancer Center, which is a local hospital in Stamford, Connecticut. And she had, they had like a care center there for cancer patients and their family. And she had come over when I was in ICU and she laid hands on me. I don't recall it, but I do recall it and stepped down. And her hands got tingly and warm. And when I was in great pain, she would be able to alter that pain. I didn't understand it, but I invited it because I was in so much pain that in between the lapse of the pain meds, I invited anything in that would soothe me and help me. Yeah. And she was such a loving, kind human being. So she would come very frequently. And then when I was leaving, and I was on the mend, she kept in touch with me and she said, I have a home in Darien and I have these Reiki 1 classes. They're very intimate. There's 4 or 5 people. I'd love you to come. I think, and she knew that I was in a transition. She was connected enough.
Yep.
And it was like she was cued in. And I went and I'll never forget, like it even opened me up more. And that was a safe place. I could talk to her and the angels were there and my connection was there. My intuition was like, sparking. I was like, wow, what's going on here?
Okay. So you're learning about Reiki in this very safe environment and it feels to you like, wow, maybe I've landed on something. I'm just going to put words in your mouth and you can tell me if I'm right or not. And I'm doing this because I think a lot of people who have gone through a journey and found their calling do have these aha moments where they feel so energized and connected by whatever it is they're around. And that becomes the driving force for them to follow that passion. So talk to us a little bit about, how did you really feel? And then how did you decide this is what I'm supposed to really be doing? Not just this feels good, but this is what I'm supposed to do.
That's an interesting one. So, we'd have these Reiki shares and, because there was just a handful of us, people would work on each other. When the Reiki master worked on me, she would say, you have it. You have the gifts. And I would think, how does she know?
Yeah.
But because she was doing it so long, now I understand, but I didn't then. So I thought, okay, so I'm going to continue with these certifications and I'm going to lay hands on my family. So my mother and sister really weren't on board and that's okay. But my father and my brother were, so I practice.
Yeah.
And they would say, we feel tingling, we feel your hands getting warm, but I still was convinced I was going back in the shoe business, that I was not going to leave that behind. Now, With that said, I wasn't going back to the vice president position because that was gone. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But out of nowhere, I meet this intuitive coach through a friend, and he's out in California, and he knows this family that's in the shoe business, and he hooks me up. And I interview, and I end up with this job. So I end up being able to do a lot of it remote, but I have to go to California like once a month for a week. I thought, oh my God, this wouldn't be too bad. It was great.
Right. Sure.
But it was good for a while. I had to carry the cases. My neck and spine couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it. It was way too much. And every time, Jeannie, I tried to step back into that world, it was pulled away.
Yeah.
So finally I said, you know what? Okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start practicing more, and I'm going to see where I can use this skill set. And the place that I fell was Angel Cooperative in Richfield.
Okay.
And I started to teach meditation out there with Reiki.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the owners said, you know what? This is going really well, and people like you and feel your energy, your gifts, and they want sessions. So I said, okay, I'll do this part-time. And at the time I said, I have to offset this. So what am I going to do? I had college education, and I said, I got to have something flexible. So I opened a dog sitting business, and the dog sitting business at the time was so lucrative.
Right.
That I knew, whether this flew or didn't fly, I'd still be able to run with everything.
Yeah.
And it worked. And lo and behold, people would come. I was in a shungite room, which was very different to me. Yeah. Right. But I would get these intuitive messages, or I'd get a vision, or I'd start drawing a picture, and people loved it. And they would come weekly. They'd come bi-weekly. They'd come, it got busier and busier and busier. So I said, this is all unfolding in the way I guess it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Right. And I could support myself. So everything was, full speed ahead, so to say. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you jumped in and decided, I'm going to start my own business.
I did.
Yeah.
I ran with it.
Were you scared?
I don't want to say scared. I was uncertain. I was like, am I doing the right thing? Am I not? And then I was also, they wanted me to do a couple hours at the store in the front. Mm-hmm. And I was hesitant, but I thought, what, if I do this, I have a sales background, and what, I could promote the Reiki.
Yeah.
It was a twofold win.
Yes.
It just exploded, because if somebody came in and they were buying stones, I could lay hands on them for 5 or 10 minutes, and they'd book a session, and it was just picking up.
Right.
And then I taught more classes. So it was just, it was progressing as probably divinely planned without me even knowing behind the scenes. Right.
Right. Well, what I also find interesting is so many of us go to intuitives because we want to learn. We want some validation that what we're doing is the right path, or we want some guidance on the right path. And so what I found so interesting is you as an intuitive, like you have some guidance, but yet it's still you got to take a little bit of a leap.
A big leap.
Right.
From what I knew. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You still have to do that, which is so interesting. Yeah. So you went out on your own.
I did. So it's a very interesting story. I had a very established practice up in Richfield. And one day, out of nowhere, I get a call from another Reiki practitioner in Pound Ridge. And she says, a good friend of mine has a space in Stamford, Connecticut. I think you should go look at it. She goes, I'm feeling this intuitively. I go, come on. I said, I've thought about this. And she said, well, Lisa, you could give up Richfield totally. You could do a part-time. Just go see. And I thought, okay, this is not what I envisioned, but let me go. And the minute I walked in to sit down with this acupuncturist, our energy came together, and I felt like I knew him forever. And guess what? He had a near-death experience. It was wow. So no coincidence in this meeting of the minds, right?
Correct. Yes.
So right away, we talked money, and we talked about, a very, negotiable rent, and I took the space. It was a shared space, but I thought, what? It was a massage therapist and I, and there was modalities there. So why couldn't we, cross sell, or why we could share patients? And I thought this would be a wonderful opening, right?
Yes.
My name was on the door. This is a bigger step for me.
Yes.
But I looked at it as an exciting step, even
Mm-hmm.
though that too was another scary. Like, am I ready for this?
Right.
I said, it's time for me to do it. So I did. And
Yeah.
I left Ridgefield and dove right into Stanford head on.
Good for you.
And within a short period of time, people would follow me from, not many from there, but enough. And then, I had a acupuncturist who had people come in the office. So he'd introduce me and things really fell into place. And I was teaching locally. So I would, introduce that I was in Stanford. And
Yeah.
that lasted for almost 4 years with a very steady practice,
Yeah. That's a good run.
until one day my client comes in. And I was ready for more. I really wanted my own room. I wanted to do what I wanted with it. And everybody was lovely there, but I was ready to expand. And I kept asking, source. I kept asking the Most High, okay, I'm ready for this. So let's, and my client came in. She goes, there's a beautiful spot in New Canaan and they have a massage room out there. Or there's a spot in Stanford. This gentleman has, many different locations. Why don't you take a look at it? And I knew once I met with the landlord and saw the layout, and I just knew. And I started there hourly. I was renting the space. It was just two of us. And finally, I said one day, I'm ready. And I didn't have, I had it following, but I just felt I was going to take another leap.
Yeah.
And I sat down and I signed a lease. So I'm there with
So
the
there
lease,
you are.
and it's my room now.
Yes.
And so I'm just, and it's flourishing.
And it's amazing.
New Canaan is a wonderful, wonderful town. I'm very familiar with from residing in Darien most of my life, but just wonderful. And I still have people coming from Stanford. I still have people coming from Richfield. So I find it amazing. I find it that, when people find a connection with the right person, they come.
Oh, of course. Of course. Absolutely. So let's talk about what a healing session is like. Let's also talk about, before we even talk about what a healing session is like, let's talk about what Reiki is as well.
Okay. So Reiki is a force, right? They call it Reiki because it's hands-on healing, right? That is from, they say, source, right? But it's the combination of source in the knowing of being able to heal. We have the power to heal ourselves, right? So for me, it's interesting you say this, Jeannie, because it is Reiki, but I also have clear audio. So what does that mean? It means that I hear and I feel. So it's not fully Reiki. It's the divine working fully through me, and it's very hard to put that on a website or in words unless you're on a table and you were there. So,
yes,
so it is directed by what you feel, where you're led, right? And for me, I'm led to, what chakra to go to. Are you heartbroken? Did you have something in your past? Is there something from your childhood? Is there something you've been struggling with? Is it a physical ailment? Is it an emotional ailment? What is it? Or is it all the above?
Right.
And so there's two sections to that. There is a Reiki session and a cord cutting, right? Those are two individual things that work on different levels to help. And I'm told what to do and what you need. You have full choice in that, right? So when you say what's Reiki is you have symbols to work with. That's a Japanese healing device, for lack of better. I don't use those. I use a few, not that much, because of the voice that speaks to me, of the feelings I get. Yeah. And the position I'm put in, it comes really as the connection from the above right through me. Right. And I know that sounds very fairy tale, but it's real.
No, it's very real. And I've done Reiki before, and it's nothing like an experience of doing it with you. And so just so everyone knows, like, you stay dressed, like you're dressed, you're on a table, you're dressed. Table's nice and warm, but you're dressed. This isn't like massage. You're not naked, you're not flipping over. You're lying there and it's very comfortable. And you will touch different parts for different chakras at different times. And so I can feel your hands and I can feel the heat from your hands and I can feel energy moving. But a lot of it, and you're not speaking or saying anything during that time. You're just moving your way through my body based on how you're being guided. And everyone has different experiences. And I know for me personally, from my experience when I was there, occasionally I would have a leg twitch or a hand twitch. And I was like, oh, something's moving, right? We're moving energy somewhere. And I tried for myself to really sit and meditate on what I was looking for some clarity on. And so for me, I was just focused very inward on being present. What am I looking for clarity on? Not trying to find the clarity, but just that's what my thoughts were around.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was so interesting, and there was also a point, and I said this to you after because you asked what I felt. There was a point where you had your hand on my gut and your hand on my heart, and I felt my throat like tighten. And that's a chakra too. And that happened twice in two different instances. I was like, my throat feels like it's, like there's a blockage there based on what little I know about chakras. And what was so interesting is that everything that I was really thinking about in trying to get some clarity on is, what am I doing with this career? What am I doing with this, getting my voice out into the world? And I love my podcast and it's truly my passion and I love speaking and, kind of like, is this really where I'm supposed to be going with this? And it was so interesting, the messages that came back. And you just pause every once in a while and I didn't, and you're just writing. And then afterwards, we reviewed everything that had come to you from the angels that you had written about. And it was fascinating because, for example, you mentioned something that has been mentioned to me by other intuitives, which was, you need to hire help. You need to hire help. And what is also so interesting about that is I walked away from that session and I was like, okay, that's a clear sign for me from the universe that I need to go find help. And I truly believe that the universe brings you people at the right time in the right place when you're ready to receive them. And so I use Upwork a lot, and I found my producer for this from Upwork. I went up to Upwork, and the sixth person I saw on Upwork when I did a little search, I was like, she's the one. She's perfect.
Wow.
Like, she's perfect. Because what I need is a very broad set of skills across a lot of different things to help me. And so it's actually a little bit difficult to find someone who has that depth of skill set that she does. And her rate was an angel number. And get this, okay. So not only is her rate an angel number, she has the skill sets across multiple platforms that I need. She specializes in helping spiritual entrepreneurs. That is her gift and her passion. I was like,
I love it.
Oh my goodness. So I tell
The
this long
stars lined up.
story. Correct. I tell this long story because I think there's so much power in Reiki and in what you do because of your ability to be intuitive and to connect to the angels, to give guidance and insight if the patient is willing to receive those messages and take them as they are intended. And some of the things you said, it might not be right now that you're doing some of these other things, but it will happen in divine time. And so it was just really interesting to see that guidance in that direction. And that is, based on my experience with Reiki, that is unique to you. That is truly a gift that you have to be able to channel these. And you knew like a tiny little bit about me, not a whole lot about me.
Mm-hmm.
And the spot on messages that you receive from the angels like gave me goosebumps because it was like, oh my goodness, how do you know that? You wouldn't know that, but yet the angels do know that. And so they channel that.
Yes, they do.
So it's a roundabout way for everyone to understand how powerful this type of session can be. So I want to talk about what types of people come to you to use your services and how should someone think about an intuitive and a Reiki practitioner like yourself, and when would they reach out to someone like you to help them?
I think the answer is, and I'm going to be a little more defined in a minute, is anytime. And what I mean by that is if you have a small question or you're being held back in life, you feel like you want to do something, but you keep falling back.
Yeah.
Why is that? There's something underlying in your subconscious that you're not releasing. So if you take the step forward and release it, there's a whole big world of opportunity out there. So I help people with cancer, to navigate and to have a tool set and to lessen their pain, depression, grief, anxiety, physical ailments, things in the past, Jeannie, were all made up of our childhood. And that doesn't mean we had bad parents. There's no course. So whatever happened through our parents, with our parents, without our parents, we carry that. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we're unaware that we're carrying it. So
Right.
why not, unfold that? Why not take that to the surface and remove it so you can live your best life now? I had a gentleman, I like to use this as an example. He reached out to me through an instant message on Facebook because I do some Facebook Lives. I find it, so people can feel my energy, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he reached out and he came for a session. And he said, look, I don't know what to expect. And I said, but you want to know something? That's the best. You're open. You don't know what.
Yeah.
And he said, as soon as I laid hands on him after the guided meditation, I felt his wife come through. And I do get messages from the deceased.
Yes.
So I got a message from her. I worked on him and he felt her presence right above her. Him.
Wow. Yeah.
And she was speaking to him, not verbally, but non-verbally.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it was nothing like he experienced with 2 years of her passing. So when we finished the session, before I could share the messages, he shared his experience and he said, something huge was lifted and I'm connected with her now. And my first message was that she was with him, walking beside him, and he would feel her now. So everything lined up.
Yeah.
And he now sends me people, but he keeps in touch with me. And he was speaking to his bereavement group in Wilton, Connecticut. So, it's not me, I'm the conduit, but if I can help people through minor things or major things, I believe that's what I'm here to do right now. So I
Yes.
hope that people will be able and be receptive to that, because
Yes.
when you give something a try with an open mind, the results can be miraculous.
Yes, you can learn a lot. So how does it happen if someone doesn't live in Connecticut and they want to do it over Zoom? How does that happen? How does that work?
We schedule a Zoom and I start with a guided meditation and I ask them to be in comfortable clothes, be in a comfortable spot, be it a recliner, whether it be a couch, your bed, it doesn't matter to me. And, I guide them and my hands will go up, like this over the, laptop and so forth. And they feel the energy because energy reads energy and it doesn't have to be right in front. And I'm still getting all those messages to share and confirm with you.
Right.
And the person on the other end still feels the warmth or tingling, still gets that vibration that lifts the heaviness or negative or what's, deep rooted. So you can do a Reiki session or a cord cutting via virtual and you're going to get the same results. I know people question that, but I challenge them to try it because if you're not in the state and you can't come, why not get a healing that can help you and clarify or help you on your journey? And not always one session is the answer, but you'll know that and you'll get a message on that and you'll be led on your side as well.
Well, and I can just personally say I've done a bunch of intuitive work on Zoom and it is just as powerful. Like it really is, because when you have someone who has intuitive gifts, it still all comes. The energy is still there. You still feel the connection. And one of the gifts of doing a podcast for me as a podcast host is that I get to connect with the energy of so many empowering, interesting people, many of the women. And you still feel that. I can still feel the connection of their energy, even though we're recording this online. I'm not sitting in front of them. And it's one of the gifts of being able to give that via a video platform to a broader audience, is for people to look and see and feel you like I can look and see and feel you. So I'm glad you offer Zoom because that's really exciting. Okay, so next question. What's on your bucket list? Like, what else do you want to do?
Oh, so much. I would love to travel and teach in so many other areas, have even Omega, I don't know if you've been to Omega
Mm-mm.
in Rhinebeck, one special place, they have a great audience there. So I would love, even when you do, Reiki meditations with intuitive messages, that's a class I teach, you can feel the hands-on healing. You still get channeled messages. If I'm working on you, whisper a message in your ear, but I love to public speak. So I would love to be in front of people, encouraging them to do more with, healing arts and, healing, a room of people just by, lifting my hands and letting them feel that vibration, letting them, if I channel something, I feel someone in the audience. I'm working on a memoir. It's been very tough for me. That's another one of the things on my bucket list because I feel
Ooh.
the journey I took is very inspiring to people. And, it gives them hope, whether you have cancer, whether you're an automobile accident survivor, whether you're going through a depression, there is a light at the end of the tunnel if you can, plow through that. And there's a lot of help along the way. And,
Yes.
you have to just do that. But I really want to have a bigger audience. And I'm hoping that I'm manifesting that. I sure feel so.
Well, yes, your story is incredible and what you do in your services. And also, I think what's so interesting is that I can understand this going from corporate America to moving to something that is a little more in the woo space, right? Not as mainstream for people, but really having that same drive and passion and commitment that you had when you worked in corporate America that got you to be a vice president. I mean, like that just doesn't happen. That takes a real commitment, drive, work ethic. And I can see in you that you're transferring that same part of you to something else, which I think is also a really important lesson, is that the skills that we have in one career can transfer to others. You just might not think so because it might not look like it's linear, but
Absolutely.
they're there. But they're there. And you're tapping into some of those core traits that you have as a skill set that makes you uniquely you, in addition to everything else.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, which is really powerful. Ooh, I love that. Okay, so before we run out of time, I always like to ask my guests to recommend a book that has impacted them personally or professionally that they would like to share with the audience. I believe books can change lives. So what book would you like to recommend?
It's called Signs by Laura Lynn Jackson.
Ooh, I haven't read that one.
Oh, it's really good.
Yeah.
I took her course at Omega, but I have to say that if I didn't read the book, Jeannie, I wouldn't have taken the course.
Really? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Because Signs is about how she's a medium from a child. She has these gifts and she helps various people. So every story is different.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel that vibration. You feel her message in the book. It is so life-changing, so powerful. And it's not one of these books you breeze through. I mean, you can do that, but you'll stop and you'll go back and stop. And you'll even go back and reread it again. And it's funny when somebody loses a loved one, a lot of times I'll buy that book and I'll wrap it up and I'll mail it because it gives them hope on their journey, that they'll speak to their loved ones.
Right.
And they'll get those signs because they're there.
Yes.
And I think people want that clarification. And then that's another thing in a session, loved ones come through when I'm working on people, messages of what's in the heart chakra, right? So those are all soothing, comforting, confirmation that's so important to a human being at that time.
Yeah.
You must read that book.
I will absolutely read that book. Oh, that sounds really positive.
You will go back to it many times in your life.
Oh,
yeah.
That's a good one. I've never read that one. So thank you. And I try to read most of the books that my guests recommend as well. So is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to make sure you share with the audience about yourself, your journey, your inspiration, your business, anything I didn't touch on that we didn't cover that you want to make sure we talk about?
I can say that, I feel the intuitive part of life is important. What do I mean by that? I think in so many instances, I had clients, a lot of men more so, that everything was black and white, but they came and they did the work and it wasn't one session and it opened their mind. It healed things that they didn't know that were still there. They thought that were healed. It made their relationship with their spouse or their business or their business associates their whole life better and remove the obstacles that they knew or didn't know that were holding them back.
Yes.
And clarifying answers that maybe they wouldn't have received or maybe they wouldn't embarked on if they hadn't come.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
So I ask people to take the plunge, but I want to say this, Jeannie, I don't offer this much, but if someone's listening to this podcast and they mention that they heard about this, my Reiki practice I'd like to offer them 10% off their first session up to June 1st, 2025, if they'd love to schedule something.
That is so kind and generous of you. So thank you for doing that. And I really encourage everybody, be open, give it a try. It is a special type of healing, and you are a very gifted, special type of healer, and they're not all the same. And I can tell you, you're very powerful with what you do. So
you're very kind,
I hope
Jeannie.
everyone takes advantage of that opportunity to give it a try and connect with Lisa. And you don't have to live here. A lot of my listeners do live here, but you don't have to live here. You can do it on Zoom as well. And it's just a unique experience. Be open to it. You never know where it'll take you and what will happen. And it might change your life, and you make some big shifts in different things that might be causing you some blockages. So one session could put you on a totally different path to starting to change your life or starting to heal, which is important.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for being on the show. I will have in the show notes everything, how people can find you, your website, your email, how they can follow you on social media. So I encourage everybody, please reach out. And Lisa, thank you so much. Thank you for the gift you gave to me from our session and for the gift that you're giving to our audience as well. So I wish you a beautiful day.
Oh, thank you for having me, Jeannie. So grateful to you.
And I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the House of Germar podcast, where wellness starts within. We appreciate you being a part of our community and hope you felt inspired and motivated by our guest. If you enjoyed this episode, please write us a review and share it with friends. Building our reach on YouTube and Apple Podcasts will help us get closer to our mission to empower 1 million women to live all in. You can also follow us on Instagram at House of Germar and sign up to be a part of our monthly inspiration newsletter through our website, houseofgermar.com. If you or someone you know would be a good guest on the show, please reach out to us at podcast@houseofgermar.com. This has been a House of Germar production with your host, Jean Collins. Thank you for joining our house.